Our webinar series. My name is Tim Davis. I lead our sales organization for North America. And so I'm just going to share some of my experiences around having successful sales growth strategies. I've spent a good deal of time leading teams in the past that sell direct to growers, primarily my time with Cargill and the grain industry, where we formed a sales culture and started working with growers directly on grain marketing plans and going on their farms and helping them make better, more informed decisions. And so I just wanted to share some of the learnings that I had from that time period, and maybe it can help you as a dealer be more successful in your growth goals. So first off, you need to prepare. You need to prepare for a successful selling season. When I hear somebody say, and I'm not saying anybody in CropX has said this, but yeah, we plan to grow, or we really need to add new customers this year. My first thought is, okay, how much, how, why, when, where, right? I'm suggesting that you hold an internal meeting with all the relative decision makers within your dealership and decide what are those realistic goals for the upcoming season, right? You're probably doing that about right now. Extractions are getting over with. You're turning the page to 24. And I suggest that you look at two different goals. How much are you going to grow from your existing customers, which we all know tends to be the easiest way to grow, and how much are you going to grow from new accounts, new revenue. Sometimes I like to look at that number differently. One is the number of new accounts I brought on board. Do I have a goal for that? And then do I have a total revenue goal? Because sometimes you get a lot of number of new accounts, which is great, but you don't get a lot of revenue because they're just starting out. And so you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success by also looking at that number of new accounts. Decide the priority level of hitting these goals over other tasks. Hopefully growth is the number one priority for your dealership, but in some cases it may not be, right? You may be trying to hire a new person or expanding a warehouse, or all the other businesses that you're involved in besides for CropX, right? You may be growing those as well. So you need to be truthful in where does this sit on the priority level. And then once you've decided what your goals are, communicate them with everybody. Now, this is a little hard because I know we've got dealerships that are just family orientated, just a couple of folks involved, all the way up to retailers with a lot of moving parts. But you want to communicate your growth plan with everyone. And then communicate updates, which we'll talk about here in a minute, with everyone. So everyone in the dealership knows what's happening, is on the same page. Discuss roadblocks. So what's going to keep us from hitting our goals? And then what can you do to overcome those? That's a really big discussion. I mean, that's kind of a throw it against the wall type of discussion. What could possibly stop us from getting 5 new accounts and growing our existing revenue by $50,000, making up numbers, right? And then I have a question here at the end. What is the most limiting factor that reduces sales growth? Without a doubt, it is a 4-letter word that begins with T. It's time. Time is always the limiting factor because other things that you are responsible for come in. So, let's say you have a plan to grow by this much by March 1st or whatever date you put on it, and other things come in the way, other things that have to get done. In a lot of dealerships, you're wearing multiple hats. How do you make sure you're focusing the time you need to grow? It's the biggest thing that you have to have watch outs for. Accountability. This may be a simple one, but if you have more than one person selling, you need goals for each of those people that add up to your total. That way, everybody knows how much of the load they're pulling. Set a time frame and have update meetings. This can help with that time factor, right? So, and I might suggest that you could have a goal by December 31st or January 15th, and then another spring goal. Break that up into 2 sessions so that you're not 5 months down the road and you haven't made much of a dent in what your goal was. And have those update meetings. Probably monthly is a good cadence where you can say, okay, how's it going? What are the obstacles that are getting in your way? What objections are you hearing on the farm, right? So, maybe, hey, I had 2 great prospect calls, but I couldn't overcome this objection in each one of them. Well, role play as a group, how you're going to overcome that objection. Maybe it's a younger salesperson that needs your experience as the manager or owner of the business. So having those update meetings, I would say, are very crucial. And then, sometimes it helps to have a reward or a prize or something if you reach the goal. And what I found is having those for the entire team is beneficial. Maybe it's a meal, maybe it's a weekend day trip for families. That's always nice to kind of put the cherry on top of the cake. If you reach those growth goals, what's the rewards? And maybe you have commission plans or incentive plans for your salespeople, and that takes care of them. But rewarding the entire team can also be important. So, any questions on planning? I don't know we're getting anything in the chat. So if we're talking about internal growth, existing customers, so suggestion with your entire team, again, that same planning meeting, make a list, have them think about a list before they come in of all the current customers you feel are ready to grow, right? And then you're going to want to contact them, right? Call them up, make an appointment. Always best to start broad. Ask them what are their farm's growth plans for next season. That has a lot of different value. One, you might find out that a grower's bringing on a new type of technology or making a change in his operation. It's good that you know that. Maybe your dealership can provide value there in some way, or maybe it's a technology you want to add to your dealership. So always just asking general questions like, in the technology space or just in general, what are your growth plans? How are you changing things up? That's just always a great way to get a grower talking. But then you want to drill down into, eventually specifically, how much are you planning to grow with us, right? Our dealership, CropX, however you would say it. And you have to ask that specific question. If not, you just beat around the bush forever, right? And hopefully they say, yeah, we're going to grow significantly or whatever. But if they respond to, well, I think we're good. I think we're good with our 5 pros. And they have 20 pivots, right? You have to expect that you're going to get that response and be prepared to overcome it. So one way to do that is to start off with seek to understand. So tell me why you feel that way. Why do you not want to add more? Why do you not want to expand? You may learn things that you don't know, right? But what you do need to be ready is be ready to prove success to them, right? So remind them of positives that happen throughout the season. I like the second one. Remind them of positive things they've said. Now, in order to do that, you got to remember it, right? And take some notes or whatever. But a grower may be all excited right after harvest because he got a good yield response, or he saved money on his fuel costs or his electric bill. And you got to remind them of that, right? And you got to have ways to show them that. So at this point in time, I'm going to bring in my teammates, John and Nick, and they're going to share some examples of ways you can overcome this objection of not wanting to grow through some of the data that we have within CropX. So I will stop sharing. And John and Nick, take it away.
Morning, everyone. Don, I'll take it with the graphs, taking a look at a full season first.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. So just for context, everybody, I've talked to several dealers in the past about meetings that they run at the end of the season. That's kind of like a looking back at the success of the season, a retrospective, if you will. And they have use that to queue up what Tim is talking about that growth plan and the plan for the next season. I always thought that was such a great idea. It made a lot of sense. So on our side, we've been brainstorming all the different ways that we can bring data and technology to help aid that conversation. So that's where we're coming from here. Take it away, Nick.
Yep. Yeah, I guess one way that I like to put it is essentially it's your report card, at the end of the year, and how do we do better? You've got the graph up on the screen.
Yes.
Cool. And I think this is a good example of how, even though this is somebody that does have a lot of experience with water management, I think we can do a better job. This was in soybeans. This is from the 2023 season, so not too far removed from when the sensor was pulled. But we started with a fairly dry profile. We were able to build that profile throughout the first month and a half, which was good. We had some rain that helped us out. But really after that, kind of maintaining that level throughout the season is okay. But eventually we really needed to start to use some of that moisture in that second foot. We really needed to kind of be working in this bottom half of the profile. And I'm cheating a little bit here because you can really tell when the irrigations occurred. So separate note, the reason you can tell that is because this is an 80, and I bet everybody can guess that this is a wiper, and that all these double hits are irrigation events. So we've got at least 1, 2, 3, and then I think a fourth one over here. And I think we can easily say that we could have eliminated a pair of those, at least a pair of those. Especially probably this one. I mean, we really didn't even allow that first foot to, to even get back to where we were with this irrigation. So, it's probably one of those moments where, I think we were hot through a lot of this period. It was beans, so people are thinking, hey, this is their time to shine. They need the water. But in reality, after this this irrigation on August 18th, they didn't use much water afterwards because we're so close to our full point. And that could have been weather related too, depending on what temperatures were happening those days. I think we did have some cool weather around that time. But in any case, and we definitely could have eliminated this. And what's the cost of running those two passes? I don't know particulars about this pivot itself, if it's electric or diesel, but there's always a cost associated with that, and it's not insignificant. I also think these beans are going to be healthier remaining in the middle or lower part of this optimal profile. So there's kind of an example of, if you take this to the grower at the end of the year, you can go back and analyze how we did and where we could have eliminated irrigations. Here's a different look at, let's see, let's go with this one instead. Same crop, with, I think, a better overall strategy throughout the year, where I really don't think we could have eliminated any irrigations. We were very on point with our scheduling. I actually think we could have irrigated earlier here at the end of August. I think the grower might have been tied up doing some other things and wasn't able to get the system started. Actually, I think I do remember what happened. This is a big wiper pivot, and I think it went the wrong direction. So little things like that, it caused us like a 3 or 4 day extra delay where did we hurt the crop? Probably not. but ideally, it's where we want to stay in that optimal zone. So there's kind of the other side of the coin where, I think we could have made sure to know better how to operate that pivot remotely and make sure we were getting the system operating in the right way, in the right direction. It is sometimes hard to figure out which ones are irrigations and which ones are rainfall events. For that, you can rely on this link. I posted it in the chat. This is a program, like a public weather program called CoCoRaHS. And you can essentially come in here and look at rainfall data in the whole country, United States, for any date. So in this particular case, I'm looking at August 9th. You can just select any date for the whole year and look at a complete rainfall map. And you can zoom in, so you go in by state and then by county to look at a more detailed amount map. So that can help you determine which one of those which of the events were irrigations and rainfall events.
Maybe also, Nick, just to point out that for convenience for everybody, we put the rainfall data that we have into the CropX calendar on every field. So yeah, it looks like Nick is navigating over there. So yeah, if you're interested in whether a particular day was a rain day or not, then this is another convenient way to go back and check. Nick, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions to tie what you're saying back to a couple comments by Tim. If you go to your second example on the full season graph, ultimately, like it's like you did pretty good here. There's a couple places where maybe maybe a irrigation timing could have been improved by a few days. Then it goes back to that question of value and return on investment of the system. And the question is like, the way that I think about it is, okay, well, what's the value of this program? You don't know what this graph would have looked like without water management and without the sensor data being there. And so do you have any recommendations on how you do that in a conversation with a grower, taking this graph and saying, here's roughly what we think of the value of this system was this year?
I think one way to do that is to ask them how their scheduling would have been determined without it. And a lot of times I think that's, based on how many days after it has rained, or it's just kind of a feeling as to how dry it is, or maybe they're relying on a crop scout. But there are a lot of examples where, especially at the end of the season, you may say one thing and scouts may be saying another. And a lot of times it's related to, you just don't quite know what's under the ground, whether it's there, whether it's not, how maybe a large rainfall event may have affected your irrigation events. So like, I think this is a good example here on this first one. They had 2-3 days where their usage essentially is almost nothing. And it's those types of things that you really can't account for unless you're measuring that soil moisture intensely. And so, it's those types of situations where if they're just going off of the number of days after it was rained, or maybe after it had been irrigated, that they start to get too far ahead of schedule.
Okay. And I think you alluded to it earlier, but depending on, where you're at in the country or the world, your well depth, your pump, all that stuff, an unneeded irrigation pass, very often $500 or $1,000 or more. So any unneeded irrigations that you can pick out, that's money in the bank and multiplies up. The other question I was going to ask is going back to Tim's scenario of somebody with 30 pivots on the farm and 5 probes. What would you recommend as a way to use data or the technology to help explain more of that opportunity on the remaining 25? Like, have you ever looked at, variability within the 5 or talk about soil types, or how would you approach that from an agronomic or a data perspective?
That's a good question. I would start with how you strategically place those first 5 and trying to identify the variability within fields. And probably as often as they would find the ones that are variable, you may find the ones that they don't even know are variable. Because I can show you sensors that are on the same half section and the schedules are completely different.
Yep.
Year in and year out, tried moving to multiple different locations over the course of several years. Schedules stay very different.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
And from a large grower's perspective, I mean, I think the more I get into my career, the more I sit there and go, if you have that many systems, how do you even keep track of where in the world you were? Like they're bouncing around so much during the season, just trying to keep stuff running. It rains and then half of your pivots get shut off because it rained in the north half of your territory, and then you don't remember where you shut them off at, so you're not sure if you are too wet in this half of the field or too like without a way to measure it and just even keep track of the logistical part of it. To me becomes a big value add with a large grower.
Yep, good point. So anything else, Nick, or I can show a couple things on the app here to point out some other opportunities for folks.
Yep, go for it.
Okay. So Tim, I wasn't going to show too much here. I know you got more content to cover, but just real quick for everybody. I think for experienced dealers, everything I'm going to show here is a little bit of a reminder. But for some of our newer folks, this might be new. One is that, Nick was just showing down at the field level on the main app, the season time view of one of our normal graphs. And you can continue to use that as normal. But we've also got this report feature that I think can be extra convenience because you can create these reports quickly. You can even do them in batch so that, someone with even dozens of fields with you, it's just the same number of button clicks. And this gives you basically an entire story of the season. I've just got one pulled up, for example. The way the system works is it creates a PDF, and I'll just show you this next page here where this goes per grower. So if you're dealing with multiple growers, you don't have to worry about pulling out 2 growers out of the same report. It's smart enough to do that for you. But then it'll create a table of contents, any number of fields that you want reports on. And then each one of them has, individual data on rainfall events. It's got the soil data that we have in the system. It's got all your graphs, all that set up for you. It's created as a PDF so that you can create that for your grower, email it to them so they got a copy. You can print it off for an in-person conversation if you want. The other thing is that we did work for folks that are dealing with growers and you're helping them with like NRCS equip cost share money. We did work with some NRCS folks to make this report as, I think, appealing and relevant to them as we could. So for a lot, there's a lot of variability from district to district, but for a lot of districts, this has everything that they need in order to do the soil moisture sensor cost share. So I think there's a lot of value there for the topic today of the growth plans and the postseason summaries. The other thing that I was going to show you real quick is, you know, Nick, I know you've had a couple webinars lately this year where you've talked about spatial data and how that can play into the data conversations. I think 2 weeks ago we had Lute from the product team on talking about the new machine data capability. This is just an example that he showed that I've got pulled up. This is a yield data map. And this can be really useful if you've got a grower that has access to these files and you guys can have a conversation around those. It plays into a lot of what we're talking about here. The total yields on the field, you can get from the combine harvest monitor, looking at variability. So, for example, if you're dealing with a field where you're using water management to try and smooth out a variability problem, looking at that combine yield map can be really powerful way to center that conversation. And on CropX now, we've got it set up to where if you pull that machine data in, you've got the ability to see a map where you can see the sensor pin overlaid with the machine data base map. So these are relatively new resources from CropX for you, hopefully helpful. To get to both of those, by the way, just button clicks wise, if you go over here to this more actions menu on the top right, both of what I was just talking about is in here. So you'll find machine data over here. You can import whatever you want, more or less. And then reports is over here. So Tim, that's all I wanted to show there on the app for now.
All right. I will get back my screen here. Thank you, John and Nick, for doing that. That's great. I always, one story that I tell on myself is, if I was headed to a sales call and you pulled up to me at a stoplight, maybe before we all had speakers in our cars to talk on our phones, you might look over and think I'm crazy because I'm talking to myself with my hands moving. But what I probably was doing was going over objections, right? Objections kind of come in a pattern around certain growers based on their personality. And if you know the grower ahead of time, you probably know what they're going to say or maybe how they're going to say it. I don't want you to have preconceived notions going into the call, but it helps if you can think, okay, what's the 3 likely things that they may say that they don't want to grow this year, and already have ways to overcome them. That way you're not caught off guard when you're physically in front of them or on the phone with them. Just a little bit of a tip or a trick, I guess, that I would share. So let's shift from growing internal customers to the harder part, which is prospecting for new customers. Same thing as before. Make a list of new customers. If you're asking for referrals throughout the year, you should already have a good start of that list, or maybe you already contacted in season some of these folks that you think you want to grow for next year. Referrals are a funny thing. There is no better way to grow your business than getting referrals from existing customers, but it also seems to be the hardest thing for a salesperson to do. It's a phenomena that I haven't been able to figure out. But you get a referral. You can get a referral basically anytime you have a happy, satisfied customer, right? They can be happy with you, the dealership, CropX, the hardware, the end result, doesn't matter, right? If a grower says, and I've heard you guys say that, the ultimate satisfaction is kind of, they get their yield maps and they get to the end of the season and they say, boy, I can't figure out how I ran my irrigations without these probes before. Bang, what a perfect opportunity to ask for a referral, right? And there's lots of different ways to ask for a referral. And I probably don't ever do it the same way twice, but it's really simple. It's like, do you know 3 growers that could possibly benefit from our services the way we've helped you on your farm? Right? Some form or fashion of that statement, right? Now you'll notice I said 3. I was taught by a very respected sales trainer that if you say the number low, like 2 or 3, which is usually what I say, 2 or 3, it doesn't make them think it's a huge task. They got to give you 20 names, right? You're just asking for a couple. And generally they're going to stammer around a little bit and go, oh, I don't know, or something like that. But then you can come back with, well, it would really help, if they know that you referred them, they'll probably call you. You can talk about the value of what we did for you. I'm going to tell you 85% of the time, you're going to get referrals. You may not think you will, but you will. And then the second question is, ask them for permission to use their name. Sometimes this is not as high a percentage, probably around 70% of the time, they say yes to that. The reason you want that is because you want to be able to create credibility with that prospect. And I'll talk about that in just a second. So you say something like, is it okay if I mention that you gave me Sam, right? And, depending on the way they feel about that, they'll say yes or no. The other thing that I want to talk about is getting out to the edges of your territory and using referrals in that manner. So I know a lot of you have been in your dealerships for a while, and you probably got a lot of the high-tech progressive type growers in your area, and you've grown them up to a level where they're satisfied, and you're like, okay, how do I keep growing? Well, you're going to have to expand your territory. Well, then you say, well, yeah, but that costs money to drive an hour and a half away and that type of thing. So I get that. But if you get one customer at the edge of your territory, then just say, hey, yeah, I'd love to work with you. But obviously it'd be way more efficient if I could capture a few other customers in this area. Once I get out here, if I could install probes at the same time, it would really help me. And then the grower's motivated to give you referrals because they want you to do business with them. And so they'll say, yeah, sure. Have you tried George and Sam and Bob? And then you can get that territory growth in a small pocket of an area by using referrals. So I'm a very big referral person, if you can't tell. Once you get into it and do it, it just becomes second nature. And you can get them all throughout the year. Someone says, man, I love the way the new V4 goes in the ground, right? Oh, that's great, man. Do you think of anybody else that could experience the probes and maybe they had bad experiences before of installing and extracting, and we can use that as a reason to talk to them. I mean, there's just 100 ways to use referrals. So please put that in your repertoire if you're not already. My last point here is consider paying for a farmer list inside and outside your territory. Some are very good and some are not very expensive if you're just looking at a handful of counties. There's some companies that got a lot of good data. I've never got a farmer list that I wasn't surprised by something, even if I thought I knew the territory really well. So that's just another thought. Making the appointment. So this is important. You can't move down the road. You got the referral, you got the name, but you can't get anywhere if you don't get on the farm, right? So in general, progressive farmers don't like drop-ins, right? Maybe combine rides are the exception. You can say, I was in the area, I saw your combine, can I jump in a cab with you? And those are always great times to do sales calls because you have a customer that's captured in that cab. But if you're trying to get on the farm like post harvest, it's really important that you get that appointment. In today's world, I like to text and ask for a good time to call. They may ignore it, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. You just send them a quick text. Hey, I was hoping to get some time with you in the next 30 days to talk about what we do here at XYZ dealership. And if you have the referral, you want to use that name early in that conversation. You're establishing trust, you're establishing confidence, right? So I was talking to Sam Smith and he said that you might really like our technology and would be somebody that would be interested in learning about what we do. Oh, really? Sam uses your services? Yes, he does. We've been growing with him for 3 years. Bang, you're in at that point, right? Ask them what they know about the services you provide. So a lot of cases they think they know, but maybe you have additional services or new technologies came on board. In the case, like for instance, disease monitoring, nitrogen leaching, maybe there's new services they don't know about. And then the bullet point on this slide is ask them if you can come visit them, not to sell them anything, but rather to find out if your services are a good fit for their farm operation. I know that sounds a little cheesy, but it really is an important statement to make, and it really is true, right? You're not a used car salesman. You're not selling no matter what. You're going to sell if it's a fit, and that's all you're trying to do. Give me 30 minutes. Let's talk about what you do, how you irrigate, how you make decisions, and we'll see if what we have is a fit. And then obviously you move to when's a good time to meet. Sometimes that's hard to get people to decide your schedule, their schedule. There's would early or later in the week be better, morning, afternoon, and you try to work yourself into a time. Be ready to overcome objections here. This is way harder, right? You got that existing customer who says, well, I don't think I want to expand. You know him, you've got a relationship. It's easier to overcome that one. In this case, you may not know this person at all that you're talking to on the farm or on the phone, or you may know them a little bit, right? And you're going to get well, I'm awful busy, right? That's the first one that always comes. Or, yeah, I don't think I'm interested. Or, yeah, I used moisture probes 7 years ago and they didn't work. Or, I had a bad experience. Or I hear those things are a lot of hassle. You can make that list up yourself. What do you think they're going to say? And then again, practice how you would overcome that, right? Too busy? When will you be free? When are you not going to be busy, right? Especially if you're contacting them in early November. You got all the way to spring. Sometime they're not going to be busy, right? So try to pinpoint that time frame of when you can talk to them. Don't think they're interested. This one becomes where you don't want to be too cocky, but you need to talk about the big wins, right? So, you don't want to raise productivity. You don't want to save water. You don't want to save energy costs. Just give me 30 minutes. Asking you to try a few, not the whole farm. Talk about retention rate in your territory. Mention that referral name again. Talk about other happy, satisfied customers you have in the area if you have their permission. Anything to get them to think, yeah, I should give this person 30 minutes of my time, right? The bad ag tech experience, dig into that. Find out who, when, why, right? It may have nothing to do with your services, or maybe it does, and you can overcome with advances in technology and things that have happened since the last time they tried precision irrigation management.
Tim, can I jump in on this one?
Absolutely.
Well, I think this is a very interesting point that you're making here, and it's real, right? So the ag tech burn syndrome is a real deal. And so, yeah, I think basically being prepared in your own mind about how to respond to this, whatever it may be, is very, very important preparation step.
Great. Thanks. Too much hassle. If you're a full service dealer, that is an easy one to deal with right off the start, right? Hey, that all comes on us, right? We're going to install, we're going to extract, we're going to monitor, we're going to work with you depending on your service levels. You can remove that one right away. All of that's really important, but I bullet pointed on this slide, ask who should be there from the operation. This is from the School of Hard Knocks. You go out and you have a great sales call and it's all going the right direction. And then you find out, well, my brother's got to be involved in this decision as well, or my dad, or whatever. And guess what? you just basically, you didn't waste your time. You got one guy excited or one person excited. But now you probably got to go through it all again with more people in the operation, because they'll say, "Oh, I'll take it to dad and we'll make a decision." Well, now it's out of your hands, and you don't know what he's saying to his dad about your product or service. So, if possible, try to make sure that the decision makers are there. Sometimes it's not, but it's just a good watch out, because it really takes longer. The close cycle takes longer if you don't have all the decision makers present. Set a date or time of length. I think you noticed probably when I was role playing, give me 30 minutes, give me 30 to 45 minutes. I usually don't like to say an hour. I usually like to say 30 to 45 minutes. And then it kind of stick to that time length. We'll talk about that in just a second. If you can't get them to take an appointment, which will happen, right? Then pivot to, maybe you've got a winter grower meeting coming up, and pivot to, okay, but I'm going to send you an invite. I'd really love for you to come to our grower meeting, right? Or maybe as a dealership, you create a little video webinar of you and your services, and you email that to them and get them interested that way, right? Always agree to say, hey, I'm not giving up. Hey, can I call you back in a couple of months, check in with you in the season next year. I think those are great. And like if you're visiting a prospect in season, that's awesome, especially if you have a referral that would let you kind of maybe even take them to the referral's farm and show them what's going on. Anything like that in season, preparing them to say yes in the off season for the following year is golden. So this isn't just a November to March process. You're always recruiting. You're always looking to build your customer base. So when you get on the first appointment, all right, I like to send a reminder text the day before. Farmers get busy. They're not always good about putting things in their calendars, and you don't want to drive an hour away and then find out that the person's not available, right? So the day before, hey, are we still on for 1:30 tomorrow afternoon? That's just a good little tidbit. Always when you get out of the car or the truck, be excited, but be professional. Thank them for their time, and then just go into question mode, especially if you don't know much about their operation. Growers, farmers love to talk about their farm. They're proud. They love to talk about their families. You just ask all the general questions. How did you get into farming? Who farms with you? Tell me about your operation. What crops do you grow? I mean, they just all come out. You might spend 20 minutes just learning about their operation. But eventually you want to get more specific with your questions around your dealership's value, right? So the typical questions that you probably all have asked, and even John and Nick were asking some of these as they were going back and forth there a few minutes ago. How do you know when to irrigate today, right? If you don't have moisture probes. How do you know when to adjust when you get sporadic rainfalls across your farm? How important is irrigation to your overall production, right? Probably that's going to be a yes. Well, that's something you can use to close with later on. Do you believe that you sometimes over or under irrigate, right? This is the gas gauge or the fuel gauge example, just to kind of get them thinking, how difficult would it be to operate all your farm's machinery if there were no fuel gauges on the equipment? Well, it'd be really damn hard, right? I'd run out of fuel in the middle of a field. That type of stuff. How important is leaching, and how do you know when to fertigate in season, right? Talking about some of our additional solutions. You might ask a question about, do you use a disease model? Those types of things. This question. You can't really ask too many questions. Eventually, the grower will get tired of it, but you really need to work in some specific answers to questions that are going to help you sell your product. You can go into all other different levels of questions. And I just thought about like 4 different categories, like water. On a scale of 1 to 10, how serious of an issue is today's supply of groundwater, and where will it be in 5 to 10 years? If the sun's right there with you, or through your questioning that there's sons coming into the operation, touch on the next generation, touch on that emotional piece of water availability. And maybe they're already on allocations, and then that, you already know where you're at. But there's lots of ways to close around water use and supply of water. Leaching. Do you believe nitrate runoff is a serious issue where measurements and reporting are going to increase? Right? Most guys are probably going to say yes to that. Well, part of our program is season ending reports that show that you probably didn't have much leaching, or if you did, what ways can you make sure that doesn't happen as much in the coming seasons? Fungicide, maybe not for corn. I mean, most guys put fungicide on most of their corn, but on the other crops, potatoes, etc., how do you know when and how often to apply? And then from our effluent standpoint, how do you know how much capacity a field has to absorb wastewater? So there's 100 of these you could write up, right? Again, it's preparation into the sales call. Watch outs. Make it conversational, not an interrogation, right? Don't write down 30 questions and just read them off and write answers, right? It needs to be conversational. Be shaking your head, agree to their answers, give some of your own examples, right? Like for the nitrate leaching one. Yeah, I know a grower right outside Des Moines, Iowa, and they're out measuring tile water coming out of tiles and seeing about nitrates, and this is real, and things like that. When you get it into a conversation, you're really moving towards a good start in a relationship. The bold point in here is, if you get a question and you don't know the answer, tell them you will get them the answer and tell them a timeline of when you will get it to them. This shows you care, it shows professionalism, and you follow up, right? So I get a question that I can't answer, which happens a lot to me, by the way, since I'm only 1 year into this industry. But, I say, hey, I get that to you by tomorrow afternoon or by Friday. And if for some reason I don't have it by Friday, it's a text to say, hey, I'm still working on getting you that answer. I should have it by Monday or the first part of the week. That shows that grower that you care and that you're following up with what's going on, and you're not just moving on to the next person. The whole time that you are asking all these questions, you are listening for buy signals in their answers, right? Somewhere along the line, you're talking about water, and the grower says, I will agree, water is going to continue to become more scarce. Or the question of how do you make irrigation decisions? Well, we make our decisions based on time of year and what George the neighbor's doing, right? That's a little funny, but a lot of people do look at their neighbors and get panicky early in the spring. Oh, I need to irrigate. Well, no, your moisture probe says you don't, right? And we think we're doing our part to increase sustainability. Oh, really? Tell me more. Tell me how, right? And then how are you measuring that success? This is the reason why you're asking the questions, is that you want to hear things the grower says that makes them a candidate to buy your product or service. About to wrap up here, guys. Then you need to transition at some point off of questioning to what you do, right? And that's really easy. There's always a point in a sales call where that feels like the right thing to do. And here's a transition statement. Based on our conversation today, I think we have a number of services and solutions that would add value or be a fit for your operation, right? Boom. Now we're out of questioning and we're into talking about what we do. Now, this is real important. Talk in general in the beginning about what you do. This is where I fail. I get so excited about what we do and our products and services that I just want to talk and talk about all the details. And pretty soon I haven't shut up for like 10 minutes. That's bad, right? You want to stay at the high level of what you do and then see if they'll ask you questions to get into more detail. That's an excellent sign, right? You start broad, they ask questions to get into more detail, they're bought in, right? They're seeking to understand. You always want to do check-ins. Does this make sense? Any thoughts? Read their facial expressions. You can see if someone's not quite tracking with what you just said. that's a good sign to stop and say, hey, do I need to go over that again? Did that make sense to you? The time thing. Usually when setting the appointment, you've asked for 30 minutes to an hour. Be mindful of that. If you're reaching that time, say, hey, I see we're almost up to our 30 minutes. I've got more time to continue if you do. Again, respectful, professionalism. It makes a difference. It's the little things. Okay, closing. This is the easy and fun part. And it's also an easy way to transition, right? So you're kind of done with the whole conversation about what you'll provide. You've mentioned the referral's name, okay, and you're moving through everything. Well, I've sure enjoyed our conversation. Thank you again for taking time to visit. Based on our discussion, what are your thoughts moving forward? And then be quiet. Don't say a word. Let them make a statement, right? What are your thoughts moving forward? There's 100 ways to say that, right? How would you like to move forward? What are you thinking about? What we just talked about? Something that's a question, open-ended question to them that gets them to speak about the last 30 or 45 minutes of what they are thinking, right? Assuming that the answer is something positive, example, well, you made me think of maybe we should be measuring things better, which is kind of a general statement that a grower might make. You got to pull more out of them again. Tell me more. Try to get them specifically to say things that close the business themselves. Then you can do the, well, I'd be happy to go back to the office, send you a quote, or better yet, how about I come back in a few days? I'll bring a quote back, gain the agreement on the second appointment while you're there. Don't leave that open-ended because sometimes it's hard to get them pinned down after you've been there the first time. Or you know, you can close in one call. Now, we said up front that we weren't there to sell them anything, just to see if it was a fit. But if you gain their permission to talk price and try to close, you're fine, right? So, you know, they're asking about price, which a lot of them will, right? So, you know, gain their permission. I can, you know, if you'd like, I can give you some prices right now, answer any additional questions. That's a good transition sentence there. You know, the ABC is always be closing. If we can close, we don't want to go, oh, I didn't want to close today. No. We'll close if we can close. Gaining their permission is the important part of that. If you'd like, you know, like we can talk prices, we can talk about service levels, and move into that type of a conversation. Obviously, perfectly fine, and it will happen in a lot of times, especially if you knew the person going in, and you know, maybe you tried to get business from a couple of years ago. You know, the more you know the relationship, the more often this can happen. And then, you know, just to summarize everything I've been talking about, I know it was a lot. It's recorded, but my hope is you just grab 2 or 3 of some of the things that I talked about. Doing better job at planning, having those update meetings, trying to gain some referrals, getting those appointments, asking better questions, thinking about how to handle your objections, looking for buying statements as you're getting the answers to the questions. You know, if I just helped twinge or make you think about a couple of those things, then I think this has been a successful time frame. And the last thing is, you know, bring your TM into your plans if appropriate, right? Even in the planning stages, let your TM know what your growth goals are. They'll help, right? They can come to your grower meetings. They can go on farms with a large prospect if necessary, but communicate that to them. They would love to hear that your goal is this for growth by December 31st or by March 15th. That would be a great conversation to have with your territory managers. So here's my contact info. You know, if anything piqued your interest, you'd like to ask more questions, email me, text me, call me. I'm available anytime for any questions you might have. And in the essence of always be closing, I want to remind everybody that we have the largest discount percentage on hardware right now, 20%, and the lowest renewal rate of $250 for the next season, only available until the end of this week. So you only got a couple days left to take advantage of these 2 opportunities. So if you weren't aware of this, I'm making you aware of it now. Reach out to your territory manager and get things taken care of for 24. There won't be, you won't be able to do it at a lower price than what you can do right now this week. So with that, I thank everybody for their time. Nick, any questions that we need to cover?
I do not believe so. I would just second the don't get into the details thing. I've fallen into that trap.
Yep.
When I started,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's
Yeah,
talking about software or hardware, just
yeah.
it's not about
easy
the
to do.
details.
No, the details come later. When they get more into making that decision, they'll ask the questions they want to know. So you're exactly right. All right, everybody. Thank you for your time. Have a good rest of your week. And we really thank you for your business. We appreciate you being part of the CropX family. And any way we can help you, we can. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.